As Biden's term comes to a close and Trump is about to begin his second, the global pressure on China is increasing. The Chinese authorities, with their economy in tatters, are facing one nightmare after another. On the international front, a meeting of the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, is currently being held in Canada, where it was announced that China's application for membership has been postponed. This marks the fourth time since 2021 that China's application has been put on hold. The Biden administration has announced its third set of restrictions on China's semiconductor industry in 3 years, effectively putting an end to China's claims of localizing its chip production. Meanwhile, Trump has threatened to impose hefty tariffs to prevent China from bypassing tariffs through third countries. At the same time, within China, BYD, the world's largest electric vehicle manufacturer, has asked employees to accept pay cuts as the company struggles to navigate the tough economic conditions. The World Trade Organization is essentially in a state of collapse, and the international trade system is increasingly excluding China. The U.S. is legislating to remove China's most favored nation trade status, and the European Union is largely siding with the U.S., with some countries even refusing to recognize China's market economy status. The Chinese Communist Party is now facing a sudden and severe storm. Chinese products are expected to vanish from the U.S. market. Some commentators suggest that with Trump back in power, China's foreign trade could revert to the state it was back in 1978, before the U.S. and China established diplomatic ties. One netizen posted, "Politically, they're enemies. In propaganda, they're foes. In technology, they're friends. In trade, they're partners. How should we deal with this relationship?" Another netizen remarked, "On one hand, they support Russia, Iran, and Hamas, while on the other hand, they want to join the CPTPP. You'd have to be mentally unstable for over 70 years to want both." When China applied to join the CPTPP, the spokesperson for China's Ministry of Commerce, Gao Feng, once again made empty promises to the world. He said that China had conducted thorough, comprehensive, and in-depth research on the agreement's contents, and China was willing to implement reforms to meet CPTPP standards, offering high-level commitments to open up more than its current treaty practices in terms of market access. But when lies are told too often, they eventually lose their power. China's economy rose and fell, and it could be said that its success and failure were both a result of the United States. In 2001, with the support of then-President Bill Clinton, China successfully joined the World Trade Organization, WTO. However, many countries believed that the Chinese Communist Party deceived the world with false promises. Clinton, back then, had high hopes for China, saying, "By joining the WTO, China is not simply agreeing to import more of our products, it is agreeing to import one of democracy's most cherished values, economic freedom." After China's accession to the WTO, it took full advantage of the organization's rules and preferential policies, benefiting greatly economically and rapidly growing its economy. Yet, China has never truly adhered to WTO rules, nor has it taken responsibility for its actions. The CCP has continuously been accused of manipulating exchange rates, rigging major project bids, providing massive subsidies to state-owned enterprises, infringing on intellectual property rights, and artificially manipulating export prices, among other violations. According to data from the U.S. Census Bureau, in the 20 years after China joined the WTO, U.S. imports from China grew fivefold, reaching a total of $504 billion annually. As China grew wealthier, its human rights situation deteriorated to unprecedented lows. Now, the United States has abandoned the narrative it once promoted, that trade with China would lead to its democratization. Instead, the U.S. has recognized that under President Xi Jinping, the Chinese leadership has never stopped repressing domestic dissent and projecting military power abroad. Since Trump launched the first U.S.-China trade war, Chinese President Xi Jinping has repeatedly attempted to reshape the global order through economic and trade means, trying to seize the position of world dominance from the U.S. However, he has failed to do so. Now, it seems that another showdown between Trump and Xi is inevitable. In fact, the very purpose of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, which later evolved into the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, was to exclude China and establish a new, fair, just, efficient, and harmonious global economic system. The TPP was the precursor to the CPTPP, created in May 2005 by 4 countries: New Zealand, Singapore, Chile, and Brunei. The U.S. later joined and took a leading role. Japan, Canada, Australia, Mexico, Vietnam, Peru, and Malaysia also joined, forming a trade bloc of 12 countries. At the time, a popular saying online was, "The TPP is a club that excludes China." U.S. President Barack Obama, after the TPP agreement was reached, publicly declared, "We can't let countries like China write the rules of the global economy." Chinese trade expert Mei Xinyu from the Ministry of Commerce jokingly said, "The TPP is just an effort to kick China's butt." On January 23, 2017, U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order pulling the U.S. out of the TPP. Later, on November 11th of the same year, the TPP was reorganized into the CPTPP. Unlike the WTO, which is based on a commitment system, the TPP and CPTPP require that the countries meet specific standards in order to join. Commentary and analysis suggest that many of the provisions in the CPTPP agreement are essentially tailored exclusions specifically designed for China's political and economic system. These include conditions such as the independence of labor unions, free from government influence, no subsidies or tax advantages for state-owned enterprises, ensuring fair competition among state-owned enterprises, private companies, and foreign enterprises. Foreign businesses are allowed to keep their servers in their own countries, public disclosure of public officials' assets, a stable and transparent political system, an open and free economic environment, long-term market potential, and strong labor rights and working conditions. Despite China's persistent efforts to join the CPTPP before Donald Trump's presidency officially began, it was unable to do so, as CPTPP members did not agree. The difficulty lies in the fact that China could never meet the prerequisites specifically designed to exclude it, given the systemic differences between China's model and the conditions laid out by the agreement. As China's dreams of joining the CPTPP were completely shattered, U.S. President Joe Biden dealt a further blow to Xi Jinping's ambitions. On December 2nd, the Biden administration announced its third round of restrictions on China's semiconductor industry in 3 years. This new measure tightens export controls on semiconductor manufacturing equipment, memory chips, and other related items, and adds 140 Chinese entities, including chip equipment maker Nora Technology Group, to the U.S. export control list. This move marks one of the final large-scale actions by the Biden administration to curb China's access to advanced semiconductor manufacturing capabilities. The goal is to prevent China from acquiring or producing chips with military applications, or those that could pose a threat to U.S. national security, particularly in the field of artificial intelligence. Commentators suggest that Trump is likely to retain many of these hardline measures against China after his return to office. In recent years, as the U.S. and other countries have restricted the export of advanced chips and manufacturing tools, China has ramped up efforts to achieve self-sufficiency in its semiconductor industry. However, Chinese companies remain years behind global leaders in the chip industry, such as NVIDIA in the AI chip sector and ASML, a Dutch manufacturer of chip-making equipment. The Chinese government has been using various means to bypass these restrictions, sourcing chips and manufacturing equipment through third countries. Some Chinese chip firms that were recently added to Washington's new export control list have pledged to accelerate localizing their supply chains, stating that their recent efforts to build up equipment stockpiles will allow them to continue production. The new U.S. regulations impose additional restrictions on China's largest contract chip maker, SMIC. SMIC was added to the U.S. Commerce Department's entity list in 2020, but previously some shipments worth billions of dollars were still allowed under special licenses. This new policy will expand U.S. authority to prevent American, Japanese, and Dutch manufacturers from exporting chip manufacturing equipment to certain Chinese factories, even if the equipment is produced in other parts of the world. The U.S. will also have the authority to control the export of any goods containing U.S.-made chips that are shipped to China from abroad. Biden's further restrictions on China's access to chips before he leaves office have effectively closed nearly all avenues for the CCP to acquire these critical technologies. Chinese authorities quickly responded with retaliatory measures. On December 3rd, China's Ministry of Commerce issued a statement announcing that it would strengthen export controls on dual-use items to the United States, signaling its intention to escalate tensions further. prohibition on the export of dual-use items to U.S. military users or for military applications, germanium, gallium, antimony, and super-hard materials. Exports of these dual-use materials to the U.S. will in principle not be permitted. Exports of graphite for dual-use purposes will face stricter end-user and end-use reviews. The announcement makes clear that any organization or individual from any country or region found violating these rules, either by transferring or providing dual-use items originating from China to organizations or individuals in the U.S., will be legally held accountable. Dual-use items refer to goods, technologies, and services that can be used for both civilian and military purposes, or that can contribute to enhancing military capabilities. On November 25th, Trump warned that he would impose a 25% tariff on all goods from Mexico and Canada until those countries stopped allowing the influx of drugs produced in China and unchecked immigration into the U.S. Mexican officials have responded, pledging to control immigration and drugs while also indicating that they would replace Chinese products with domestic alternatives and halt certain Chinese factory plans. Chinese car manufacturers, including BYD, are heavily investing in Mexico. BYD is aggressively expanding its overseas business, with assembly lines established in Brazil, Hungary, Thailand, and Uzbekistan. It is also building factories in Mexico and expects sales in the Mexican market to double next year. However, Chinese automakers are facing setbacks abroad, and the domestic environment is growing increasingly difficult. An internal email from BYD, which was widely leaked and circulated on Chinese social media, revealed that the company had requested a supplier to reduce prices by 10% starting next year. In the email, BYD Executive Vice President He Ziqi mentioned the new energy vehicle sector was entering a great battle and a phase of elimination. He emphasized the need for the entire supply chain to work together to continue reducing costs in order to enhance BYD's competitiveness. China is the world's largest market for new energy vehicles, but the competition is fierce, with numerous brands vying for market share. This intense competition has sparked price wars among manufacturers aiming to secure market positions. The industry's fierce competition has also led to financial difficulties. In September, Shanghai's market regulatory authorities added the Shanghai branch of Hican, a joint venture between Chinese EV maker NIO and automaker GAC Group, to the abnormal business operations list. Reports indicate that the Shanghai branch of Hican laid off large numbers of staff and delayed severance payments. Another Chinese electric vehicle brand has reportedly been trying to improve its cash flow by reducing salaries, cutting jobs, and implementing layoffs. BYD's difficulties have been ongoing for some time. In May, reports surfaced of a strike at a BYD factory in Jiangsu, with workers protesting the lack of overtime pay, highlighting issues with low wages. Similarly, other Chinese automakers like Li Auto have also faced significant challenges, including a 77% increase in inventory in Q1 of this year, indicating overproduction and a lack of consumer demand. Li Auto also reportedly planned to lay off 18% of its staff. Now, BYD's management is forced to implement further cost-cutting measures, which may result in reduced worker incomes and the potential for more strikes. In addition to its struggles in the automotive sector, China's solar industry is facing similar challenges. On November 29th, the U.S. Department of Commerce announced new tariffs on solar panels imported from 4 Southeast Asian countries. The preliminary findings of a review showed that some of these solar products were being sold in the U.S. at prices lower than their production costs. To offset this unfair practice and to protect U.S. manufacturers, the U.S. Commerce Department decided to impose tariffs of up to 271% on these products. About 12 years ago, after the United States imposed similar tariffs on solar products imported from China, one of the countermeasures taken by Chinese manufacturers was to set up production lines in other Asian countries that were not affected by U.S. tariffs, and then sell the products to North America under the names of those Asian countries. In April of this year, the American Alliance for Solar Manufacturing Trade Committee filed a complaint accusing large Chinese solar panel manufacturers with factories in Malaysia, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Thailand of dumping products into the market, causing global prices to plummet. This complaint prompted the U.S. Department of Commerce to launch an investigation into these imported products. According to U.S. government data, since Washington began imposing tariffs in 2012, the volume of solar product imports into the U.S. has doubled, reaching a record $15 billion last year. Although by 2023 there were virtually no solar panels directly imported from China, about 80% of the imports came from Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, and Cambodia, all of which host Chinese solar companies' factories. In addition to targeting Chinese products broadly, the U.S. has also started imposing restrictions on Chinese business people entering the country. On November 30, 2023, Hong Kong media reported that the 2025 Consumer Electronics Show will take place in January 2025 in Las Vegas. This event has long been an important trade show for the global consumer electronics and technology industries. Of the approximately 4,000 companies expected to participate, more than 30% are estimated to come from China. However, the report indicated that despite many Chinese companies receiving invitations, the U.S. had refused to issue visas for their attendees. Analysts said that such visa restrictions for CES were unprecedented, marking a further deterioration in U.S.-China relations. A 28-year-old marketing professional from Beijing, who was denied a visa, explained that the U.S. embassy officers showed no interest in the fact that she was attending the show. She believed that if she mentioned CES in her visa interview, there would be a 90% chance of being rejected. Chris Pereira, the founder of the New York-based consulting firm Impact, recently stated that half of the 40 Chinese companies his firm had trained reported that their employees, despite holding official CES invitations, were still denied visas, with no explanation given. This was unprecedented, even during the COVID-19 pandemic. Chinese companies have traditionally been a major presence at CES. In 2018, a record 1,551 Chinese companies exhibited, and even in the lead-up to the global outbreak of COVID-19 in 2020, over 1,000 Chinese firms participated. However, after the U.S. government blocked Chinese companies such as Huawei over national security concerns, combined with China's strict border controls during the pandemic, the number of Chinese exhibitors at CES drastically dropped to 210 in 2021, and further decreased to just 159 in 2022. In 2023, the number slightly increased to 493, and only rebounded to 1,114 in 2024. Media reports suggest that Chinese companies' inability to attend in the past was due to the pandemic, but now the reason for not being able to attend in 2025 is due to visa restrictions. Public opinion analysts suggest that once Trump returns to office, he will likely ignite the second U.S.-China trade war, which is expected to be more intense than the first. Xi Jinping has already lost much of the confidence he had 6 years ago, and is completely unable to cope with the situation. The ongoing economic turmoil in China, combined with the widespread discontent among the lower classes, could potentially lead to significant social unrest.